Hi, I'm Eliza, and this is a pseudo podcast I am recording for an English class because I can talk for 20 minutes, but it asked me to write an 8-page paper, and no thanks. Now that I've done that, I'm going to kind of talk about what I will be talking about, and also giving a trigger warning for things that will be coming up in this podcast. But to introduce my topic, I am talking about repression and violence in high school and kind of the connection between them, and I'm focusing on the musical Heathers. And to go along with that, my trigger warning. I'm trying to sound happy. It's not fun. I'm going to be talking about school shootings, specifically Columbine, for reasons that I'll get into later. Also, vague references to bulimia, as well as sexual assault or attempted sexual assault. And so yeah, if you don't want to listen, click off, please. I would hate for someone to have a negative reaction to this. And to kind of start this off, I'm going to do what I'm calling a baseline, which is letting people who don't know Gothic or Broadway things, like a brief mention of things that I think are important. So the first thing is like repression, and this is like Freud's definite kind of idea of what it is, but it's something that we think we have moved past, but we haven't, and it kind of that's what gives us this like uncanny feeling, and also like it's the big point of like the return of something is also the anxiety. The other thing is Savoy's idea of Gothic being cultural, and this makes sense because Gothic literature has been used to deal with anxieties, and so for specific cultures are going to have different anxieties that you want to get through and explore in a safe environment, which Gothic allows. And the last part is Gothic buildings. A lot of the time, buildings in Gothic literature are kind of like characters too. A lot of the time they have a very, they have similar aesthetics, but it's a little more loosey-goosey in this one. I'm going more off of how the school affects the characters or how they assume it's affecting them. And then my Broadway thing to know is that race isn't important, especially in musicals. For the most part, they cast for talent over looks, because that's the most important thing, is that you can sing really well versus, you look close enough to how I think the character would look. And now let's get into the not so fun parts. Columbine. What do we know? 2 students, Harris and Klebold, were bullied by their peers for years, it seems like, and no one did anything to stop it, so they took matters into their own hand and planned months in advance this kind of like paramilitary attack on the school, which included a lot of firearms and a lot of ammunition and bombs. And something to also note about this school shooting is that there were racial undertones, like they were like anti-Semitic and also anti-black, and they were really gross about it. Another thing to know is that they posted a lot of the buildup of what they were going to do online. I don't know what platform they used, but assumably it was like a MySpace. But yeah, they shot up their school and they killed 14 people, and then they killed themselves, making it 16. But they were hoping to make it up into the hundreds, which is why they brought bombs, but very luckily they did not blow up, which is maybe the best thing that could have happened. But yeah, that's kind of the like standard for what's happening, which is why I mentioned the race thing about Broadway, because Heathers the musical is also it's based off of a cult classic movie from the 80s, but it was made into a musical around 2014, and so it has a lot of the same type of like characterization for school shooters, And in our case, that's going to be JD, who is our main antagonist, but he was also our main protagonist boyfriend. And our main protagonist is Veronica Sawyer, and she was an outcast turned popular. And her boyfriend, JD, as I stated, is kind of our school shooter archetype in a lot of the ways of how he dresses, which for Columbine it was black with like trench coats. JD is not racially motivated because it's not important in this musical. It deals with a different anxiety, which I'll talk about when I'm done with the characters. The other characters to know are the Heathers, who are the popular clique, and it's made up of Heather Chandler, Heather Duke, and Heather McNamara. And then we have Kurt and Ram, who are also kind of antagonists, but not like, they're minor if they're antagonists. And then we have, they also just might be shitty characters, like, I'll get into it later, but Miss Fleming, who is like the start of our really crappy adult figures. And then we have Ram's dad, Kurt's dad, and also kind of Veronica's mom. And so this is, just to set the scene, we are in the senior year of a Midwestern high school, Westerberg. And the kind of the focal point of this musical is the death of Heather Chandler towards the end of Act 1. She is killed by JD and Veronica. They poison her with cleaning supplies, but in Veronica's case, it is an accidental, like an unintentional one. She just wanted to like hawk a loogie and a hangover remedy to get back at Heather Chandler for kind of threatening Veronica's like high school life. But JD gives her like a mug full of cleaning solution, and Heather Chandler drinks it without like looking at it or recognizing that it's bad, and then dies. And they write a suicide note, and like they forge one for Heather Chandler, and then like it kind of infects the town, because for any non-Americans, American high school is anxiety ridden. There are so many like things that you are trying to like repress and be like, oh, it's fine. But I think a big one in American high schools is the idea that one is that high school is the best point in your life. That's something that like you hear a lot, although it's not true by most standards. The other thing is that you're not going to grow past who you were as a high school student. That's like a real fear, a real anxiety I feel like more people have, which Veronica is also dealing with in this musical. In the song Beautiful, which is the opening to our musical, she has this very hopeful tone that people will change, because she like is comparing them from like kindergarten to senior year and the like decay of who they've been as humans, where they definitely have gotten worse. Like Kurt and Ram are awful, like assholes, like slapping trays out of people's hand and like making fun of people's weight and like implying that being gay is a bad thing. But Veronica still is hopeful that people can grow, because like, to be perfectly like, for her logic, she's like, I've seen them all grow into this. I can also see them grow out of this and become people, because I feel like a lot of these characters like I don't want to call them people because I know they are, when there's just something like not human about how they interact with other people, and that just might be like the empathy is kind of lacking, and it's high school and they think that they're like in charge, but then it's like, because they're also in this like space between adulthood and childhood, and they're like on the cusp of becoming adults. I think that's where a lot of this fear is stemming from for Veronica, where she just wants to get out of high school to start her life. She's like, I want to move past this stage. Like, she can't be done with it soon enough. But I think that in itself is also an anxiety of like growing up too fast, which is brought up in the song 17 and 17 Reprise, where Veronica's like, hey, we're only 17. And for 17, she's talking to JD about it, where it's like, hey, like, I know we've killed people, but we're 17, and we can get better, and we can grow up, and we can be normal, and we don't, like, let's just be 17, which is kind of contradictory to where Veronica was at the start of this musical, being like, I can't wait to be out of here and in college and starting my life where I don't have to be, like, where I can grow and change and become a better person, because, like, I'm not being held back by people, which is really fun and really good. But the thing about the introduction song, Beautiful, is that we're also seeing the darker side of people, where there is a random person who says, I'm going to quote it, I'd like to kidnap a Heather and photograph her naked in an abandoned warehouse and leave her tied up for the rats. Which I think also is, like, a good contradiction to who Veronica is, where she's very optimistic and willing to give second chances, and then you see that, like, in the underbelly of this high school is, like, people that probably don't deserve a second chance. Like that a random child. It's gross. You should know better. But the other thing, I think that for Veronica, where it's like, I can see the good in people, she does in JD, which, you know, we've all seen the good in JD if you've seen the musical or listened to it. Especially in his, like, first kind of solo song, which is Freeze Your Brain, where it's kind of like a look into who JD is. And, like, you're just so sad. You just want him to be happy, because he talks about his dead mom and his, like, absentee father who, like, is bouncing them around from state to state. And so, like, all of this trauma he's accumulating, he has no one to vent to, because his father's kind of an alcoholic and also kind of now in the, like, child role when it comes to their, like, father-son dynamic, which is unhealthy, because, like, JD pays the bills and cooks the food and is, like, taking care of everything to be like, oh, we're happy, we're a normal family, but, like, he has no stability, and he's, like, moving constantly, so he has no friends, so he's always going to be a loner, and it's just setting him up to, like, have an unfortunate life. I think that's especially prevalent towards, like, the end of the song, which, just to go through it is, or just to quote it, is, freeze your brain, shatter your skull, fight pain with more pain, forget who you are, unburden your load, forget in 6 weeks you'll be back on the road, when the voice in your head says you're better off dead, don't open a vein, freeze your brain. That says a lot about JD. And we get even more into, like, his backstory and why he's so messed up, but just, like, the kid's just, like, internalizing and freezing all of these bad negative feelings to be like, I can't deal with you right now, and so I'm going to freeze you, and you're not gonna thaw, and you're just gonna exist inside me, and like, I'll pretend they don't exist, like, and I'm like, child, I'm gonna call him a child because I'm 22 and he's 17, but it's like, he, like, isn't getting the proper help, and, like, not to be like, Veronica, you really messed up here, but Veronica also is just like, oh, like, she's really intrigued by him, you know, and she's like, oh, you're, like, a bad boy, but also vulnerable, and she likes that. She's like, I can see the beauty in you. She's like, I can see more than, like, what you're portraying, which is, like, this very tough kid, and she's like, you're, like, you, like, need help and support, and I can kind of give that to you. But she can't. Listen, you can't fix a person with a relationship. Just a heads up. But, it's this kind of thing where, like, for Veronica, it's, like, confronting this, like, I don't know, but she's like, oh, people are good, people are inherently good. I can prove that with, like, JD, sort of. Like, she is intrigued with him by his, like, bad boy things. He has a very, like, school shooter aesthetic as far as how he dresses, which is, like, in all black and a trench coat, which he also did in the 80s movies, but, you know, post Columbine, that is kind of the thing with school shooters, is they, like, people look for the trench coat. That's kind of somehow indicative of being a school shooter, which, you know, wild, crazy. But yeah, there are just so many thoughts and feelings, and I just keep saying yeah, because I have to, like, stop myself and be like, breathe, think about this, like, it's fine, we'll get through this together. And just to kind of get into, like, another thing in this musical, it's kind of like, JD's lonely, right? He's got, like, no real connection to parents. That's kind of for every character in this musical who interacts with an adult figure. There is so much disconnect. Miss Fleming is the worst, as far as things go, where she makes, like, Heather Duke has bulimia, and she walks in on her throwing up in the bathroom and threatens her with detention because the bell rang. Like, the kid's vomiting in a bathroom, and that should not be okay or normalized, but it kind of is, and she's just like, oh, who cares? But then after Heather Chandler kills herself, and they find the suicide note, she kind of makes this performance out of it, like it's a performative aspect where she has them make copies so she can hand them out to students so they can, like, talk about their feelings or whatever. But it's gross and performative to ask these kids not only to read something that, like, they shouldn't be reading, because that's a suicide note, like, it should be, like, private and, like, oh, it's not a performance, but she's asking them to, like, go up and talk about it in front of their peers like it's reading, like it's something where it's like, oh, like, look, I can see. It's kind of like close reading. She's like, oh, like, how do you feel it? Well, not close reading, but it's like, how do you feel about this? Like, what emotions does this give you? Like, and then she continues that. She continues this gross performative aspect with these kids' trauma, where she uses their trauma as, like, a way to, like, free up her own repressions, as, like, she never got past, like, the shitty things she's done, so why should these kids? Is kind of the vibe I get from her. And she's awful. But, like, there's just so much that's being unchecked in this school, which is not why I think, but it is the reason why I, like, mentioned Gothic buildings as kind of a character, because JD, especially after him and Veronica break up, and in the song Meant to Be Yours, he talks about the fact that he believes high school is the reason why they are no longer together. Almost as if, like, the school itself is pulling them apart, and not the fact that JD is coming unhinged because he's thawing and he's, like, not dealing with his emotions healthily. He never was, and he never really does. And Veronica just, like, can't deal with that. Like, she's someone who's like, I see the good in everyone, and for her, like, at that point, JD's not good, and he's never really good again. But, like, we see kind of this acknowledgement of, like, what Veronica saw in him in the song I Am Damaged, where he kind of is like, hey, you beat me, and I'm going to blow up so the school doesn't. Which, you know, is really unfortunate, but it's one of those things where JD's like, I care about you and I think you're a better person. Because as much as, like, JD's like, I'm in love with you, I think JD was like, you were the first person to care about me, and so, like, I think you should live. Like, I think you deserve the chance to make the world a better place, because I certainly won't. And it's heartbreaking. And I think that also has to do with, just to go back to kind of Columbine, like, I think after that, the event in American history, we, like, didn't see the good in things, and especially in, like, youth culture. Like, video games were heavily attacked for being, like, the cause of it, and, like, as I mentioned, like, people started to focus on fashion and stuff, and instead of addressing problems, like having adults talk to kids, they were like, oh, like, do this, or this, or, like, having kids do it, where it's like, hey, if you see a kid who's lonely, like, you should go and talk to them, like, you should go and be their friend, which doesn't always work out as much as you want it to, like, almost as if, like, the adults are, like, putting off their responsibilities to these kids, and to, like, helping them, and being like, oh, you can do it, or, like, what we're policing isn't what we should be. But that has something to do with kind of the, like, youth group, like, the generation gap that happened post 1960s, where it was like the first generation to really see the shift in like, oh, parents and kids don't know each other very well, or like their worlds are very different, especially if you wanted to think like post civil rights, where you had a lot of protesting in the 60s and a lot of people standing up for themselves, and then you later on had people standing up for their like rights in education and being like, hey, like teachers shouldn't be able to treat us like however they want, like they should have limits for what they can do and how they can treat us, which is all like student led and not adult led. Like no adult ever questioned the fact that like there was a point in time where kids could be hit and it was an acceptable punishment. But it does definitely kind of like show that, and I think it definitely shows it in like, and for Heather's, there's a song called Lifeboat, and then it leads into Shine a Light Reprise, but it's Heather McNamara talking about like her struggles with Heather Duke kind of becoming Queen Bee post Heather Chandler, and the attitudes that she has, where she's like, I'm on this lifeboat and like everyone's like crowding and shoving and pushing and it's chaotic and we're not, like, I'm not gonna survive this, like they're gonna shove me out of the lifeboat. And then Shine a Light Reprise is just like openly like chaos, as far as like there is no adult intervention. Heather Duke is mocking Heather McNamara for trying to commit suicide with pills. She like goes out of her way to be like, oh, you're just gonna whine and you want to die, but like, and you deserve it. You deserve to die because you don't deserve to live. And like, no adults are stopping this, because like Shine a Light, the original song, is sung by Miss Fleming, because she told these kids that this is a safe space and this is a safe environment. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen to you, but you do. And I think that's part of this like other thing, is this like disconnect, where it's like, oh my goodness, she had an adult that basically was like, I'll create a safe space for me, and I'll tell you it's also safe, but I will watch you drown when you're asking to be like pulled out. Like, Veronica's the person that stops it and is like, hey, this is not cool. Like, you told her that she could talk about this and you lied. And it also sets up the fact, like, not for Heather, but for Veronica has to be in charge to kind of like, she needs to be in charge of her fate to make the world a better place, because she can't rely on adults anymore, because it's like different worlds. The reprise of 17, she's like, hey, I'm the new sheriff and like we're changing things up, like we will not be shitty anymore, this is how we're going to function and we're going to be better and we're going to change and we're going to be beautiful eventually. God damn it, like I promise you, like we're 17 and we're going to be different at some point, like we're not going to be this version of ourselves forever, which is lovely and great, especially because like because that's the end of Act 2, it's the song that closes us out, and it's such a good like message. This musical deals with some of the more serious topics, which is like bulimia and attempted sexual assault, and I don't think I mentioned it in here. I thought I was going to, but Ram and Kurt are gross, and that's all I have to say. But like, and then you have suicidal tendencies, or like suicidal like feelings, and like the people that like stop it are like the kids, like not the adults who don't understand what's happening. Like the best instance is like Veronica's mom, who's like tries to sit her down when Veronica's obviously like really wigged out and just like there's too many things happening. And it's during the song like Yo Girl Keep It Together, Veronica's mom like sits her down to be like, hey, like talk to me about this, like I was a kid once, like whatever you're going through I have too. And it's like, you like at that point 3 students have died, and for her mom to be like, anything you're going through I've gone through it too. And it's like, unless her mom is just going to pull out the fact that her school also had 3 suicides, but like were really a couple. And like one of them was an unwilling party that just wants to see the good in everyone, so is giving JD chance after chance after chance. Like, it's not relatable. And I think it's like really interesting the way that like Veronica's mom decides to interact with her, being like, we're the same. And Veronica's like, you don't know what's happening in my life, you don't know me, you don't know anything about like what I'm going through. And great, awesome, perfect. I just don't know, like, but like I think it sends a strong message where it's like kind of this, it's okay that your parents don't understand you, because they don't need you, or you don't need them to, to live your life and to become a better person and to like grow and change and become like an adult and like fit in with society. You don't have to be like your parents, and they don't have to understand you, and high school is just a moment in time, and it's not going to follow you past that. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this musical. It gives this like very optimistic like push after like dealing with serious topics, and especially with like kind of it being a post-Columbine musical about school shootings or just like school violence. And it gives everyone the ability to just kind of be like, hey, like, life will get better, high school's not forever, and you're going to change, you're going to be the best version of yourself. Like, you have that potential. I think that's the magical thing about this musical, is that it's like not stuck in its anxieties, and that we move past them, but we move past them in acknowledging them instead of like repressing them, which is lovely, is a nice change for something like this. So those are my thoughts and feelings. I went over like 7 minutes, and I'm very sorry, Allison. I hope this was informative. I hope this wasn't too like ranty, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Okay, bye.